Casey, how exactly did you get involved in invention, if you don't mind me asking?
In invention,
Yep, and building things,
I wanted things
tinkering
I
things.
didn't have that I thought should exist.
Well, you have to become the change you want to see in the world, as that old quote goes.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, I always had a mechanical aptitude. My father would fix things, be
Mhm.
it cars or toys I would break or he would break, and slot cars and whatnot. So that world fascinated me. And then as one grows as a young man, you want things, whether it's watches or go-karts or air guns or whatnot. And as you grow, it's the same thing, just bigger and more interesting. And when you're not born to family money, well, you got to find a way to either fix up something old and junky or make it yourself. So that's what led to me being me.
Well, well, did you have any favorite toys that got broken that you fixed, or ones that you couldn't fix back in the day?
Ones that I couldn't fix. Well, that was the challenge I think that led to a lot of getting smart is because so many toys are not built to be fixed, especially plastic. And when I would break something like that or get broken, my dad would use a soldering iron and melt
Mhm.
it back together. So that was kind of eye-opening to me. It's like, how do you fix things?
Mhm.
I know as you grow up, it's like, oops, I broke a window in my parents' house. Like, how do I remove this one piece of glass from a lead line thing and then fix the lead before they know? But a toy actually here. Aren't we lucky? I've got a visual aid.
Mhm.
It's the gold pan 1980s RC10, real famous icon from Real Control Racing. But yeah, that's mine from the 80s
Mhm.
as it last sits. So this is something that, got fixed and broken and upgraded and modified as I was a kid. I don't remember how old I was when my dad first got this. I might have been 5 years old, 6 years old. I don't really know. And I still have it. But I only ever got to race it once when I was a kid. My dad worked too hard and was too busy, um, or didn't make the time to take me racing. So I only got to go once when I was a little kid. When I was up on the driver's stand, I was too short to see the whole course. I couldn't see over the like guardrail of the track in the far, so all I could see was like the antenna in the wing of car. So I couldn't I couldn't steer it. I could only drive in the part of the course I could see. And I told my dad and people, I'm like, I can't see. Nobody did anything about it. And I kind of wondered if my dad was embarrassed by me and never took me back. I'm like, I'm fast where I can see the track, Dad, but I can't actually see I
Uh,
can't see the car on the track. I don't know. That's kind of sad, isn't it? I don't know. But
yeah. Did you go from there to go-karts?
oh goodness gracious. I don't know. I mean, I was always in a radio control because I could do that largely, at home, with just my mom, and I learned to fix it myself, and build it, and then slot cars, of course. Um, I don't remember how old I was. We did get a go-kart, not like a racing go-kart, but like a five-horse Briggs and Stratton. I love that thing, man. Um, it just meant the world to me. And then when I always wanted to race, but I couldn't get my parents to take me anywhere or do anything. So, um, my dad got a Volkswagen Scirocco when I was a teenager, like 15, and we autocrossed for a few years together. So that was great, nice bonding type thing. And then in college, I drove the Formula SAE car for Ohio State for a couple years. Obviously, we built it. The program's more about building the car. And then when I was in college, I sold my childhood go-kart and saved up my money to buy a racing go-kart, a
Mhm.
Yamaha two-stroke powered KT100 sprint cart and race in like Fremont and Circleville, Ohio, and stuff like that for a couple years. But I was always super into bicycles and whatnot, And actually, I ended up, I guess it's a middle-aged thing. Um, they talk about midlife crisis. I don't think I'm ever going to have one of those because my entire life has been what you call a midlife crisis in a nice way.
Oh, you've
But
started ahead of schedule.
Right. Yeah. So, but there are changes with that time. And I think there's something that happens to men and women, especially men, I'm guessing, especially when they have kids, that suddenly you're in a different place of life that you can relate to from another vantage point from when you were a kid. And I think the journey through your own mind and memories becomes more important. And I think people look for tangible things or experiences that awaken those parts of your memories and brain. So that's just kind of it. But my childhood go-kart, I ended up tracking down. Um, an identical chassis that was absolutely dilapidated, so dilapidated. And I restored the whole thing
Mhm.
as identically as I could to the one I had when I was a kid, like really close. So I don't know. It's just one of those things you do, you know?
Yeah. So from there, how did you get into the full-size cars?
Well, I turned 16.
Mm.
I had a four-door Volkswagen Golf, stick shift, the GL, not the
Mhm.
GTI, which I loved. You know, I was very proud of it. It's also weird being in kind of a small town, Midwest, Ohio, because what was cool, of course, was muscle cars, and I was the dork in a foreign German little hatchback. I was into the European stuff, so I was always we kind of it was kind of like back, they say I think in like the 50s or the 60s they had like the mods versus rockers, kind of
Mhm.
like cafe racers, motorcycles, and then you had like the yuppies on scooters and stuff. It was kind of like that, but in the 90s, it was like the pretentious jerk European racing things, and then like the rednecks that like push rod V8s, and then there was like three weirdos that like JDM stuff. That was before like the tuner scene with Fast and Furious and all. And that was kind of it. I may have been the only pretentious European liking jerk. And I've come around, baby. But it's funny how that works. I so yeah, it was that. And you want to keep racing and you want cool cars, you want to go faster. And nobody's going to buy it for you, so you got to figure out how to work hard and make your money mean something, and buy something cheap and fix it up. And that was also before the age of like the internet is everything, so you really got to go out on a limb. And like the first wacky car I wanted was a DeLorean. My dad was
Mhm.
so against it because he's like,
Back
oh,
to the
they're
Future.
lemons, you can't get parts for it. Derp. And he didn't know anything about the car other than what pop culture did, because John DeLorean was targeted in the early 80s, literally by the FBI, to where they changed the laws. And so that was kind of the very first big mainstream psyop, destroy somebody kind of thing that happened. And that, of course, affected, car guy boomers like my dad. So I had to be, an independent spirit to be like, no, actually, I think the DeLorean's a good car and I can do this. So I ended up daily driving a DeLorean when I was in college for like 2.5 years, all 4 seasons. And it was great.
Well, how did you get into like, of course, your most famous invention, the Omega car, plus the stuff like the Batmobile and
Yeah.
the pterodactyl thing?
Yeah, well, it's funny. It kind of made me, in a weird sort of way, sort of happy that you said my most famous invention's the Omega car. Not out of a pride sort of way, but because I remember when I did the turbine-powered Batmobile, which I made a replica of the 1989 Michael Keaton Tim Burton film Batmobile, exact replica. But mine was actually powered by an ex-military drone anti-submarine helicopter turboshaft engine. So it was legitimately turbine powered like in fiction. Drove the rear wheels through a modified four-speed, semi-automatic transmission. It was super cool. There are two tachometers, one for the gas generator, one for the output, the driving turbine, and it was really rad. It was extreme, but it was drivable. But that went viral back when I built it in like I don't know 2013. So it's a big deal. And then for years, I'm like, damn, I hope I do something else. I don't want this to be the thing I'm always known for. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I just thought I'm like, I don't know. It was just
I
kind of
guess a
that. And
one-hit
then
automotive wonder.
yeah, sort of. I mean, it's super cool. I mean, everybody liked it, and I'm honored that people did. But I don't know. I just hope that wasn't the only thing I'd ever be known for. Um, and then it's funny that the pterosaur, the flying pterosaur, I was inspired by Paul McCready, who did the Gossamer Albatross and Condor, which were some human-powered airplanes in the 80s, maybe late 70s. It was 80s anyway, early 80s. Um, I think he got a sponsorship from SC Johnson Wax, and through the Smithsonian, they did a half-scale flying model of the pterosaur, the Quetzalcoatlus
Mhm.
northropi, which would be the largest flying species of the Cretaceous era. And it was half scale. And I was doing Genius Garage, my educational nonprofit, one year, and we were building a Sopwith Camel biplane, as well as doing the race car. So I did like two teams I was mentoring, and then some young students in design and automotive and industrial design. I was mentoring them all in that. And the pterosaur idea came out, hanging out with a bunch of creative, driven young, happy-go-lucky people while we're building an airplane. And they all thought I was silly. And I'm like, oh, you do, huh? And so I got like one student to be like, this is a great idea. And then the other still thought it was crazy. So I'm like, I'm going to do this. So I built a full-scale flying pterosaur model that actually had flexible wing membranes and was done very reasonably close to the architecture and the physics of the anatomy of the animal from looking at fossil record and such. And I put the wingspan in at the medium estimate of the Quetzal, which would be 38 feet. So it's the size of a medium fixed-wing aircraft. Build a big wooden cradle in the back of the turbo diesel pickup truck and flew it at my buddy's farm, just up in ground effect. So enough to fly it, but not like way up in the sky, so we could control it. So we had one student was driving the truck. My wife was riding, I think, in the back, poking her head out this sunroof to record. Somebody else is in the truck. Me and another dude were standing up in the truck with our backs to the cabin. And then I think one of my students' dads was laying in the truck bed with my motorcycle racing gloves, holding a rope with pulleys. And so I think he was in control of launching it and then holding it. And then me and the other dude were tethering the leading edges of the wings with like a safety stopper. And then so what we would do is, since it didn't have any control surfaces, it was just a gliding model. And because the head's out on the end of a long neck and has a directional fin, it's inherently insanely unstable if you don't have like a gyroscope or it's an actual animal. So it's just barely kind of stable, which means I actually made a pretty good model. So when it was up in the air, the neck is right here. So we would just push like on the neck or like bump the wing to help keep it stable. We did a pretty good job, except for except for it dipped a wing and hit a pole and broke the wing. But I fixed that, so it was a good time. Flew it at my buddy's farm.
Well, how about how did you get the idea for Genius Garage? I know you've mentioned some of the longer motive stuff, shall we say, but what's the short version of Genius Garage and how is it right now? Any of your favorite successes or not so successful parts?
Yeah, the shortest answer to both of those questions is one, the American educational system sucks. And two, I'd say the last successes, and actually I put this in a post. So the last two students I've helped getting a job, one was perhaps the best student I've ever had. He was part of Genius Garage for a full year. We did everything from helping design the IndyCar rebuild to, building cars, fielding cars and racing. And he came back, was even crew chief when we ran the Lotus Exosphere F1 car and the Daytona prototype. But because the job situation is so poor in the last year, especially anything relating to aerospace or military aerospace engineering, that sort of thing, there's just no jobs. So we've got one of the top young engineering graduates in the country. I put him up against anybody. Um, no job. He's working as a manager at an Aldi's grocery store. Top mind in America working as a manager in Aldi's grocery store. And there was someone watching my channel, and I was talking to him, subscriber, kind of a fan, and he works at Lockheed Martin. And I told him about the student, and I'm like, you got any thoughts? He's like, well, actually, I can see some jobs posted that are not publicly made available. So I connected them, gave him my honest but very obviously rave review from my experience. So he was able to get two interviews back to back. And during the interview, they talked about Genius Garage the whole time, as I hear is the case with virtually every student I ever have. Like the Genius Garage ends up being the most valuable and relating experience to hiring people at big engineering companies and such. So they said to him, like, even if we like a candidate, it takes about 2 weeks for HR to get back to them and even follow up. Well, the next day, somebody calls him on the phone. He's like, "Who that is calling me?" And he goes, "Yes, hi, this is so and so from Lockheed Martin. I just wanted to give you a call and see if you had the opportunity to review the job offer we sent you." And he goes, "Come again?" They sent him a job offer the next day. So he is, in fact, working for Lockheed Martin. I'm very proud of him for that. And then there was another um, very nice young woman who is a brilliant mechanic and engineer, whom I mentored. And she's had a difficult time finding things, partially because of the nature of the job market. She had to kind of change her career path because of AI's destroying her original intended path. But she's just fantastic with engineering and mechanic stuff on a high and way with cars. So, working to help facilitate possibilities and whatnot. Found one up in this area that I think will pan out. Um, and I hate to bring this up just because the radical politicalization of our time socially, but and I preface what I'm going to say now with, in the course of doing Genius Garage for 11 years now, I've had every walk of life student you can imagine. They're all driven, they're all brilliant. but they're every color, they're every creed, and they're various sexualities from time to time, but it's not my business. But
Mhm.
and this person has had a hard time, and truth be told, she's trans, and it's really rough, and for her, because a lot of people that normally would treat everybody the same, they get frightened by the political radicalization that
Mhm.
happens in America. And so, you just have to have the, kind of the strength of character to see a person for a person and, help them out, even if there's a perceived danger out there in the world. And so, it doesn't, it's just, it's rewarding, to help good people with a good head and heart, find jobs that they deserve. But just put that little extra effort in so they actually have the opportunity to get a job based upon their own merit. And I enjoy that. Got a lot of different stories of it all.
Well, that's a cool segue for Genius Garage, but I know you've done many different projects with Genius Garage. Independent of the students, which projects do you think are the coolest, and maybe ones that you would go back if you had the chance?
Ones that I wouldn't do again in Genius
Yeah,
Garage?
or ones
Oh
that you
yeah.
would
Well,
change
that's a
somehow.
good question. I appreciate you answer it. And I'm laughing because there's this, God, God damn man. There's Steph. Oh man, I deserve a drink or a medal from time to time. I'll settle with the first one. Um, what I found, the things that work well are the things that are repeatable, that give the students a worthwhile center point as a project and program and experiences that help them grow. That, of course, is enjoyable and rewarding, that creates enough challenges, but that are, you're able to overcome them, but they're not just such a Charlie Foxtrot that you don't get some reward and satisfaction out of it. So, the yellow IMSA Corvette, the tube frame Corvette race car that we originally restored back in like 2014, and ran and developed over many years. That's just been a great, thing to have. We've done some other race cars and whatnot. Some of the ones that are more of a pain in the ass are ones that get so technological and so rarefied air and so expensive. If anything goes wrong, that it's like the Lotus Exosphere. Like that was great, but can I curse on your show?
Yeah, just no F-bombs.
Oh, too bad.
So,
Okay,
in
well
other words,
then,
it is a whiskey tango foxtrot.
oh my God, man. Um, the, I won't curse, so I'll just bring on a different personality. That delightful piece of engineering. Um, it just it would have been easier if they gave us like ex-Soviet ICBMs or satellites and said, "Here, I know you don't know Russian. There's no manual. We're launching this thing in a month. Make it work." It's the same thing. Um, So I prefer to have the things that give all the challenges necessary to students, but also makes more sense for the program. That way, if something were to go wrong, which everything does in engineering in an imperfect world, that the program can more readily, absorb that and keep going. It's just basic business logistics of running a program. So that's nice. The Stop with Camel biplane we did was really cool. We didn't end up flying it, just, we built it real nice and all, and we could have or would have, but it's so much more effort to do the finishing stuff. So it was a really good program. And I despise the idea of building things that you don't use or fly. Like, why would you build a race car if you don't go race? That's the whole point. In the sense of the airplane, it kind of makes a little more sense. We could go into why another time. Not because we're too afraid to build something to put up, because, we're the engineers that do it, so we have every confidence. But just it's kind of like a time money factor type thing for the program that
Yeah.
makes most sense. So the aerospace stuff we've done mostly has been as static models, and then
Mhm.
we've connected them with already airplanes that are flying and stuff for them to have those experiences, whatnot. But another project that I would never do again was when I was on VinWiki and telling stories, silly car stories and stuff, and that's great. That's a great way to connect people in the automotive world, and also for the public to see Genius Garage and like it. But we did the Lycan Hypersport build where we got that body from the X Fast and Furious stunt show. And the Lycan Hypersport is based on a roof, and the roof is based on Porsche. So we were able to get old used Porsche stuff, which is largely exactly the same components as the original Lycan, and build that. I would never in a million years do a project like that again.
Yeah. Un-
And the general public doesn't get it, like the nasty ankle biting, jealous fanboys that they don't care about philanthropy or teaching. I just wouldn't do it again because it's way too much time. Um, and money with, a curriculum that we could have taught otherwise with other things that make
Mhm.
sense. And then it becomes just a massive responsibility for me behind the scenes over the course of another year, even after the whole project was good for the students. So, in my entire life, from everything I've ever done that's either scary or kind of dangerous, even flying in fighter jets, I have never vomited unless I was actually very, very ill in my entire life. But I was so stressed out with that damn Lycan Hypersport build with Genius Garage. I remember once, like the second year when I'm still responsible for this darn thing, I was driving the truck to go pick it up and trailer in the winter, and I didn't have breakfast, but I was so stressed out. Like I ended up pulling over on the side of the road, vomiting on the side of the road in the winter. I'm like, this is too much stress to be philanthropic. I hate this project. Anyway.
Well, I know that's some of the thoughts on Genius Garage, but how did you get into the idea of the Swiss watch company?
Oh, well, that's simple. I mean, it's the same thing as when I was a kid with cars and race cars. I like watches. They're cool. The mechanics of them are awesome. They represent art and engineering. That's something that's very personal to people. I'm wearing one of my prototypes here today, which is built to be like a beefier racing chronograph with screw down crowns and buttons and stuff. Just classic. So I wanted to get all the highest end parts from Switzerland only. And this particular band is Alligator, made in the United States. So
Mhm.
that's what I wanted, and very similar to the classic racing chronographs, of the 60s and 70s, from everything from like Tag Heuer to Rolex to you name it, Omega. But I wanted something a little stronger, that is every bit the equal or superior to those for a good value. I have numerous other designs. So that was something I started thinking of a few years ago and seeing like, how do I get into this without actually going to watchmaking school and being in the industry with the connections I have in jewelry and the mechanical mind I have. But I couldn't get enough information. I just couldn't get there. So I kind of shelved the idea. And then a year ago, there was a watch that I had that was okay. It had a Swiss movement. I wasn't super proud of. And I thought, I should take this thing apart and see if I can just reconfigure it, make my own watch from it. And I did. It was easier than I expected. And it allowed me to find kind of the backdoor way into getting, high-end componentry. And from there, I just spent hours pouring my eyeballs over information and measurements and configurations and things. And then I started buying parts and movements and things and tools and prototyping, and it started going really well. So I get the concept and plan for a business. I've already done 10 founders watches and I don't know, maybe four other custom builds. So the effort is trending the right way. And I should soon be launching a public website, but that takes time and to grow a garden and build a brand. Frankly, I'm still busy with, I have to look after the Genius Garage stuff and mentor people a little bit here and there, even though this has been a slower year. I still have my own car projects to do. Like this 944 needs to become my daily driver here pretty quick. I've got parts laying around to finish it, and doing the YouTube thing. So I'd like for the watch company already be out and going, but I think good things like that take time and have to be organic. So I'm really happy. I got a plan, and I think it's going to mean something to go somewhere. So happy
Well,
about that.
I know this kind of segues into maybe one of our next topics, but are you familiar with like the structure of Swiss industries?
Oh, I, I know more than just kind of having a vibe, but this sounds like an interesting conversation that you bring up.
Well, I guess Swiss and kind of German industries. You ever heard of an old school economist named Frederick List in the late
I don't think I have.
1800s?
No.
Basically, I'm not sure if you recall me mentioning industrial capitalism in some of its earlier years, but basically, like the industrialization of Germany in a very short amount of time, as well as like Imperial Japan and the United States for that matter, when the Brits had a monopoly on industrial technology. First, like a lot of ambitious entrepreneurial types went to the US because Alexander Hamilton's strategy was using essentially a combination of protective tariffs and domestic subsidization of infrastructure, canals, later telegraphs and railroads, to basically improve the logistics, keep the cost of living low, so the cost of labor becomes low, and that kind of inspired later on many inside Germany. Now, this is where it kind of gets maybe into Ohio history, but there the Ohio River Valley has long been a craft an area for handicrafts and commercial logistics. Even 10,000 years ago, there was the old copper culture of the upper Michigan Peninsula. Like back then, the copper they found was enough that you could heat it up on like a campfire. So they made bronze and copper tools long before Eurasia by thousands of years.
Yeah, and I've been hearing from I don't know what the heck happened to him. He never got back to me. Somebody reached out in the Northeast Ohio area who is on with his property to some pretty unbelievable ancient peoples things relating to early metalwork and such that is a little bit beyond what we all say or
Yeah.
come to think is only in this area.
Because I know that I visited Serpent Mound recently,
Mhm.
and a lot of the like Adena, Fort Ancient, Hopewell cultures, a lot of them had ties to around the 10th century or so, Cahokia and like that trade network which connected up north to the Great Lakes and down south through Mesoamerica along the coast. But what's kind of interesting is that that trade network went through Alaska to Eurasia. So we
Hmm.
found copper artifacts of similar style to the upper Michigan Peninsula that kind of date to even relatively before European contact. Like they found glass beads from Venice in the graves of Native Americans around the 15th century, like predates European contact. So
Hmm.
Ohio was kind of
How do they
like,
know it's from Venice?
well, through things like materials, carbon dating construction techniques,
Mhm.
and the Native Americans and the Native Siberians they've been having similar culture exchange for a long period of time before the Imperial Russians got up there, before like English-speaking settlers got up
Interesting.
there, and even before the Spanish, who kind of explored the Pacific Northwest before the British did. So a lot of that trade route is actually kind of interesting because I know most history, the American continent was kind of separated for a few thousand years, at least thanks to the advent of civilization as we know it in most of Eurasia, the Mediterranean, and Africa. So we were kind of going down a parallel path. It's just that the early copper workers didn't really know that, oh, you got to refine it till you get the bronze with a blast furnace and go down to iron, because at the time they didn't really have the political economy, for lack of a better term. And that's one of the reasons that sadly we don't know as much about, say, the Hopewell culture or the Mississippians as, say, the cultures that had some form of
Mhm.
writing, like the Mesoamericans
Oh,
or the
well, yeah.
Incans. But getting back to the present, there was one culture, Native American culture, that did try to climb the tech tree. Arguably the constitutional republic that predates our own, the Iroquois. So
Hmm.
basically, they basically ended up having a lot of German settlers come over, like the Palatine German families around the 1600s. And they began like showing them metalworking and essentially many intermarried, many kind of formed trade networks with the Pennsylvania Deutsch, the Pennsylvania Dutch. And during the 30 Years' War, which pretty much flattened most of Germany at the time, they had a large refugee population. And that's one of the reasons that like the Pennsylvania Dutch, for lack of a better term, and some of those trade networks intermarrying. That's one of the things that kind of like helped turn the American frontier at the time, into a very lucrative trading network. But it also had economic effects on the Iroquois because the tribes that were closer to the economic areas basically had the advantage, and eventually it led to a civil war within the Iroquois. And this is around the time of the American Revolution. Half of them side with the Patriots, half of them side with the British,
Hmm.
and the war on the frontier essentially became a war among the Iroquois tribes. So
Mhm.
we kind of had the interesting circumstance where essentially I think it was the two more powerful tribes of the Iroquois and the other tribes took different sides of the American Revolution, and the notes on the political economy of the Iroquois kind of inspired, I guess, the more controversial philosophers of the 1800s, Marx and Engels. So there was some American commentary on that, and also on the American system at the time, like trying to basically use this protectionist tariff system. And that's what kind of inspired a lot of feedback on in Europe, because it was inspired originally by writings, I think, from a Swiss guy in the 1700s, and kind of circled back because at the time Prussia, after they beat Austria basically and later beat France, like how the heck do we turn from an agricultural backwater to an industrial powerhouse. So remember, the Prussians, to their credit, they were damn good at logistics. So they basically started putting all their senior and best officers on the railroad staff as opposed to just battlefield staff. So,
Well, and that's where, if I'm not mistaken, our modern American educational school model came from as well.
yep. There are also some other reasons later on I'll get to, but there also was in 1848. Are you familiar with what happened then in Europe?
What? I don't know. What are you referring to?
Well, the revolutions of 1848, mostly ill-fated.
Well, in like what capacity specifically where, or is it generality?
Germany, Central Europe, Southern Europe. Basically, these conflicts could be seen as a kind of a direct precursor to many during the American Civil War, in fact. So what's kind of interesting, it springs out of the post-Napoleonic geopolitics because you have Metternich, the Austrian guy, who's basically they do the Congress of Vienna, and a lot of the pre-revolutionary monarchs are kind of restored to power, kind of
Hmm.
backed up at the time by the restored French aristocracy and British financing because the winners write the wars.
Yeah.
At the time, the British were busy kind of balkanizing the Spanish Empire because they needed raw materials for their factories and such. So at the time, a lot of the people in Europe didn't quite like that arrangement, and that eventually led to uprisings across Europe, right? These wars are interesting because many famous names fought in these wars, like Karl Marx and Engels, as odd as that sounds. But one of Marx's contemporaries was a guy who circles back to Ohio, August Willich. So he once
Hmm.
challenged Karl Marx to a duel for leadership of the international workers' movement. Marx declined, but he ended up fighting in the American Civil War because at the time, many of these Ohio Hegelians, as they were called, they were followers of the philosopher Hegel, and essentially they thought they saw the British and French support for the Confederacy as a continuation of the same fight, like against propping up the monarchs of their own home country. So at the time, the United States was ironically seen as like an example of what the communist movement might aspire to in a lot of ways, compared to Europe, which was very stratified and still is along its aristocratic lines. So,
Yeah, well, I think Americans are purposefully stopped from knowing too much about the parallels in Europe to our own history. Um, and it's fascinating how things go through cycles when we're speaking the mid 1800s when Europe. Because don't you know the entire reason we fought the Civil War was only slavery?
well, speaking of the Civil War, you ever heard of a guy named Webb Du Bois?
I don't know because I'm thinking of the last name and tell me
Well,
more.
he was a kind of a black historian and philosopher who wrote a book called Black Reconstruction. His whole
Hmm.
thing is that for the first few years of Reconstruction, basically the Union Army essentially set up a communist regime in name only in the Deep South because the Freedmen's Bureau, which was basically like supporting the poor whites and the blacks against the old landowner class and using federal troops to try and reinforce that, they basically kind of set up what he defined as a classical communist dictatorship of the proletariat, though it
Huh.
wasn't necessarily run by like a communist party or anything like that. At the time, this is where it gets wild because most of the federal bureaucracy, officer corps, these freedmen bureaus, they were staffed by the Republican Party. So, because they were the abolitionists. So,
Huh.
at the time, you might make the argument that the spiritual forerunner of the communists might be the post-Civil War Republican Party.
We'll have to think about that. Who, you know, that's funny. I see your point. I mean, I see it, and that's I do actually like looking at history in ways like this. Um, I think I think the powers that be don't want America looking at history through different perspectives, but I do think that's a valuable way to do it. Yeah. Well, I mean, even now. it's almost like Fringe, but Factor. It's like, hey, you remember the party that didn't want to free the slaves, the Democrats? And that's about as far as it goes in
Yeah,
modern pop culture. But no, that's an interesting, that's a really interesting thought. Yeah, it really is. No, I really can't say anything more. I
because the
appreciate
way
you
of
doing that and
history is
saying
often
that.
reversal.
Well, you just have to be able to look at things objectively with not with an overly jumping to conclusion mind, but just kind of a more of a steadfast philosophical one of time. So, yeah, and obviously I was using deep sarcasm when I said this Civil War was only about slavery, because clearly it wasn't only about slavery, but that's the only thing the general populace of America thinks, because that's the only thing anybody wants to use it for. Um, and even me saying that would be a political talking point or something that would create arguments. So, yeah, this is I'm just thinking of the memes that say who's interested in history. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's yeah. It's a wild time we live in.
Yeah. You
Now
ever
the
heard of
history thing's fun though because I don't know, I feel like it can give people a certain level of solace in a way. Um just in understanding if they do it the right way, if they look at things objectively rather than just looking at it superficially and getting more mad. Um But at the same time, too, understanding history allows you to see where things go poorly for our own time, and then perhaps that, in a sense, either I hate to use the word radicalizes, but it would certainly motivate people to some kind of action more. So
yeah,
yeah.
but one
But
thing that
how do we get on that subject?
well, I guess kind of discussing history and political economy therefore, because with
Oh, that's right.
with
The Swiss industry.
yeah,
Yes.
because when most of the I guess the Western economies were kind of configured for that industrial model, eventually, like all economies, it reaches diminishing returns. So
Mhm.
kind of like what happened with the Brits in the late 1800s happened to us after we set up the petrodollar, right? It became cheaper to do things abroad, so the industries that linger on kind of become politically motivated or jobs that someone needs for something and stuff like that. So you might have an old 50-year-old equipment filled factory because someone's cousin's a senator or something. Whereas a lot of the newer stuff, maybe you might have some DoD or defense contractor with the latest gadgets and gizmos, but it no longer has those supply chains, which I guess kind of circles back to modern geopolitics and rare earths and all that stuff.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So
Yes.
one thing that I kind of find interesting is like getting back to one of the topics we mentioned earlier, even the way that Marx and Engels kind of describe what socialism is very different than the CIA PSYOP version. Their version is any economy that basically describes uses the political entity after this period of diminishing returns to basically prop up itself. Their view is that it's a zero-sum game, right? The bourgeoisie or the proletariat. Whereas, like, you can have a reactionary socialism of a sort. Like in the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church would support charities and stuff, or kind of proto-socialistic experiments, like some of the French examples of socialism, for instance, like from the 1700s. Whereas, like, what we have now, propping up these banks and such, these companies that would have imploded in 2008, that is essentially just a kind of socialism just for the rich, not for the poor.
Yes. I'm trying to think of what I can add to this with the conversation without going down a tangent from
Yeah.
living in the now and the present, because I'm very much a do something about it kind of guy. The fact of the matter is, like, in talking about this and thinking about this and how it relates to right now, I end up getting um, quiet because things are so bad that I am reluctant to even say what I think.
Yeah. Well, that's what your YouTube channel's for.
I still hold back.
Hmm. Understand.
Um, it's a holdback because it's not a holdback from anything I think or see. It's it's directing at the now in a way that only pushes the line so far and not go over.
Hmm.
But you kind of have to flirt with it for the sake of how people perceive and feel things.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm very much a do something about it kind of guy. And actually, what's sort of, I would say, bothering me right now is that I see all the talking heads out there and realize they don't do anything about it.
Because
And so
that's their job. Their job is to be talking heads.
I know that's bad because if all you have is all these talking heads that are massive, and it doesn't matter who it is. It could be left, it could be right, it could be conservative, it could be normal, radical. I don't care. Just pick one. Pick your poison. Let's pick two that are Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro. They're both, you know, two different people. Throw anybody you want in there. Throw anybody, forget conservative side, throw in some leftist stuff. The point is like if all we do is talk about it and all we do is like complain and talk about and are excited to know more about the shadows on the wall and Plato's allegory of the cave, all we're doing is normalizing the shit government that we have and the shit life that's being pushed upon us. And I'm not okay with that. Um, I'm not okay. I'm not okay with that. Like, I'd like to think I have a future and years left. I'd like to think my family does. I want there to be a future for everybody. And I'm not going to sit here talking about shit. Like the whole point of interacting and talking about something is to understand what's up and fix it. Like, I don't want to be like, and I don't mean this mean. I think the big difference between men and women is when women talk about problems, sometimes they just want somebody to listen to them. They don't want you to fix their problems. Men, at least men like me, if I talk about a problem, darn it, how are we going to fix this
Hmm.
now? I don't want to talk about this problem. I want to do something else. So, that's just it. I don't, I don't want to be like a talking head forever and just sit around like we're a bunch of, stereotypical women at the salon. And that's not sexist. That's just normal. I mean,
Yeah.
stereotypes exist for a reason, all across the board.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's why I get quiet about some things because they're so bad. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I want to do something about it,
Yeah.
you know?
You've also mentioned that as one of the motivations for the watch company. You actually want to do old school good craft, old school
Yeah,
good stuff, as opposed to just another tech bro crypto scam,
garbage.
something like that.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, yeah. There's a couple of things there that you mentioned. Yeah, old school good craft, something that can last forever, something that you can thumb your nose at the big corporations and conglomerates, and even if it's a little smaller, maybe it can be a family thing and pass it down through the generations. Passing things down through the generations really got somehow that mindset was destroyed during, and I'm not saying it's a fault of their own, but the baby boomer generation. Look at all the businesses that are owned by baby boomers that there's no succession planning. There's no one to take it over. The kids are doing something else. Then they're selling it for peanuts to private equity companies. Like that's a failing that happened within a generation. Why? And that can in its own right destroy the future of America or at least make it go down a different path. So just acknowledging and understanding that change in history of that time allows us and me to potentially do something about that for the future. So that's important. But also in making the business and its branding and advertising be organic, what does it mean? What do you support? What is this? What's the meaning behind this? And I don't mean that as a platitude. I mean that honestly. So um, that's important for me that the business in itself can champion the meaningful things of old, as we think about it, before of our entirely manufactured world by, CIA and intelligence agency, psyops and soft political pushes and culture manipulation through advertisement and building this idiot disposable society we live in now, because people still care.
Yeah, planned
I'm not.
obsolescence, basically.
Yeah. Yes. Unfortunately, watches are a big enough deal that people love them and they mean something to them.
Mhm.
But in a sense, and I hate to say this, But let's be honest, they don't matter. I can tell time with just one watch. I don't need lots. I don't necessarily need one. There's a certain level of expense to make it as good, but beyond that, it doesn't matter for utility. So the beauty is I can flex as hard as I want with the meaningful traits and styles of old, but it's something that can not fly under the radar. That's the wrong sentiment, but in a sense that it can be niche. It can kind of exist outside the realm of the controlled garbage nature of society now, but not be a problem or threat to which wish will be crushed. It's just a watch company. So I'll consider it a little island oasis in a sea of postmodern hell. Um, yeah, so and forgive me, I think you asked me one other question and I missed it, but it's something that's meaningful to me. But unfortunately, in a sense, that's not enough to ease my burning soul right now. So it's that's why and that probably hints on the fact that the building the watch company and brand's a little slower than I'd like right now because there's other battles that need to be fought, and I feel compelled to be part of it.
Well, any advice you'd give to your students or to young people today?
Yeah, playing the victim is a garbage game, and you're a loser if you do that. So just don't. Um, they're all news outlets are only propaganda at this point. All legacy media is dead. Forget about it. Save your parents and grandparents from it. Um, understand the ability to read any article or listen to anyone, even somebody you like, and listen to the little things to find out if they are controlled or an asset or they're putting a massive spin on it. Learn to detect that. Um, and realize that so much of the entirety of our culture, from left versus right to musicians, entertainment, art, transportation, is all manufactured to keep us in a certain position and is not because it's the best thing. Um, and beyond that, if you think you're comfortable enough that you can afford to not pay attention to what's going on in the world, you're wrong. No one on earth is that wealthy. So don't take yourself off the chessboard because you matter. And your existence as a maybe as an American or anywhere else matters to everybody of your family, your community, your friends, maybe your state and your nation. So if you bury your head in the sand, you've just become another useful idiot. Don't do that.
Well, what about the flip side? What would you say to the older generations like the boomers and such?
You've been propagandized your entire life. Turn the TV off. It's dead and it's propaganda, period. If you want to keep doing this garbage about like post a picture of mechanical points on the internet and say, are you old enough to know what this is? I bet these dumb millennials and Zoomers don't. You're just as much a part of the problem as people that think Taylor Swift is God. There is no left and right. It's a manufactured thing to keep everybody down. And if you aren't thinking of succession planning and reaching down to young people to help them because you want a cop out attitude of thinking no one cares about old stuff or nobody works with their hand or nobody puts effort and no one wants to work, well, then you've been programmed to think that because it's not the case, because that's what I've been doing for 11 years.
Well,
So
for,
help her
for
get out of the way.
for those interested in starting to work with their hands or those interested in Genius Garage, anything you would like to say?
Yeah, there's no one stopping you but you. For students that will apply to Genius Garage, you know, it's interesting because not as many people apply as you think because most people just weed themselves out. And that's the same thing holds true in life. If you don't think you can do something, well, guess what? You already can't, even if you can. Look at it, assess, think for yourself, and then reassess yourself. Are you looking at it badly? Are you delusional? Are you spot on and other people are scared? And also realize when someone else tells you, I don't care who it is, what will happen when you do something, whatever that is, They're not telling you what will happen when you do that something. They're telling you what would happen when they do that something.
Yeah.
Realize that. It's more telling of the person, not necessarily of you. That's where you need to listen to what people say, but be able to self-assess properly to know if something is the right thing for you to do. And you have to have the courage to believe in your assessment and do something. That's it.
Well, thank you very much, Casey. Any concluding thoughts or notes?
Oh, nothing other than thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, and I hope you'll pardon me if I seem a little less energy than normal. I I stay up rather late working from time to time, and I my first wind of the day wears down right about 11:30 for a little while.
Well, if puppies start eating the clock parts, do you know what happens to them?
Oh my goodness. I have no idea.
They become watchdogs.
That makes sense.
Yep, that one really hounds you. So, thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Thank you.